How many feedings a day? Look into it yourself because, every baby's a little different or maybe a lot different. And I can't tell you a hard and fast rule that's going to govern your baby's life because I don't know anything about your life and your baby. But I think a rule of thumb that I think is helpful to think about, at least just have it in the background and kind of keep it in mind, is that you want to strive for 8 to 10 full feedings in a 24-hour cycle in the first month. Shoot for 8, but 9 or 10 are acceptable. In the first week, I think your hospital's discharge papers, and I mentioned previously, they might say 8 to 12, and I think that's good, in the first week especially. 8 to 12 feedings a day means that you're putting the baby to the breast every 2 to 3 hours. But I think after the first week or so, 12 is not where it's at because mom's milk will have come in by that point, and putting him to the breast every 2 hours, given how long it takes to breastfeed, it won't leave enough time for your baby to get a good quality nap. And it's not necessary. I think the target is closer to 3 hours, although 2.5 hours is fine. And again, this 2.5 to 3 hour range, it's not a technical, rigid, fixed thing, because one cycle to another, your baby may nap longer or shorter. Everything could vary. So it's not about it being precisely 2.5 or 3 hours or something necessarily in the middle. It could be a little less than 2.5. It could be a little more than 3 hours since the last feeding, and that's all okay. These are just good benchmarks to keep in mind. But I don't think after the first week or so you want to feed every 2 hours or 12 times a day. You want to be shooting for 8 feedings a day. 9 is okay and 10 is okay, but as I've said before, if you're getting 8 feedings a day, it suggests to me that your baby is getting more of those full feedings, and you'll probably see longer naps, an hour and a half, an hour and 3/4, even 2 hours. At some point, if he's napping longer than that and it's getting close to 3.5 or 4 hours from the last feeding, you may need to wake baby up, especially in the case of breastfed babies. You want to be kind of tethered to that 2.5 to 3 hour cycle. With formula fed babies, folks will tell you that it could be 3 to 4 hours, but newborns need to feed every 3 to 4 hours. They are not metabolically, it's not a good idea for them to go longer than that. But I think 8 feedings in a 24-hour cycle, especially after the first week or so, the first few days when you're kind of getting settled and your things are stable or more stable and you got your arms around it, that ought to be the target for the first month. Second month, I would say 7 to 9 feedings. And the third month, I would say 6 to 8. What happened in the case of our son? We were really, really diligent about making sure he got full feedings, and I kept very, very good records of this. And when I went back and looked at it, it almost very cleanly played out that way, like divided into 1 month, 2 month, third month, where in the first month, I have the records. It was 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8. I mean, it was pleasantly surprising to me looking back how many days we got 8 feedings a day, obviously at different times throughout the day because the cycles are all different. It doesn't mean we fed exactly at 7 a.m. and then at 10 p.m. and then at 1 p.m. No, well, we just worked off of an approximate 2.5 to 3 hour cycle and then kept records. And then looking back, boy, it turned out to be 8 feedings almost every day. Sometimes 9 feedings, and that's fine. Occasionally, maybe a small handful of times, even in the first month, it would be 7, just based on the way the cycles played out. But we got 8 feedings a day, the vast majority of the days in the first month. And then looking at the second month, almost around the time that the first month came to a close, we started seeing 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, 7. Occasionally 8, even 9 in the second month, maybe early in the second month. But we never saw 10 in the first month. We never saw 10 in the second month. We sometimes saw 6 in the second month, a small handful of instances, kind of like we had in the first month with 7 feedings. Uh, but it was generally 7 feedings a day for the second month. And then when I look at the third month, it was 6, sometimes 7, maybe 8, seldom, but occasionally 5, but it was like 666. And even if that's not how it plays out with your baby, I think these are just decent targets to shoot for. Not that you're forcing anything, but I think they're just good targets to kind of aim for. And it ought to be the case as you go from the first month to the second month that the number of feedings drops.